What is really hidden on the moon? Myths and evidence. Apollo 16, during its journey to the moon, suddenly lost automatic course control. Without explanation, and without explanation suddenly regained it. Inside the Ranger crater, the Ranger 7 spacecraft took a picture from a distance of 5 kilometers just before it fell on the moon. The photo showed a series of strange objects that NASA described as rocks, while various researchers spoke of UFOs. In February 1973, the Soviet Longhorn 2nd Sea of Galilee found a metal plate 1 meter long of unusual luster and very young age. In November 3rd, 1587, astronomers of the time observed with their naked eye a bright star on the moon between the two ends of the solar meniscus. December 11, 1671, a white cloud was observed on the surface of the moon, although the moon has no clouds. In 1783 and 1784, moving lights were observed at regular intervals on the lunar surface. In 1794, a strange object flew over the moon. July 9, 1800, French astronomers observed during an eclipse a series of moving lights that constantly changed formation, and after aligning, they disappeared. In 1821, various dates in 1821, March 5th and 6th, and February 7th, 1821, June 5th, 1821, November 7th, 1821, November 28th and 29th, 1821. On the above dates and almost throughout 1821, astronomers observed a multitude of inexplicable lights moving on the surface of the moon, and after certain formations they then disappeared. On January 21st, 1825, April 12th, 1826, March 7, 1826, and December 22nd, 1835, on all the adjacent dates, great activity of luminous objects was observed with reference point around and in the Sea of Judgments. Early 1860, 1866, 1867, all of 1869, throughout 1860 there is a great activity of luminous objects on the surface of the moon, and a particular flare-up on the above dates where conical structures were observed and mapped inside and outside the moon. Line crater, which has a depth of 360 meters and a diameter of 10 kilometers, astronomers were left speechless when 5 years later they found that the crater had then disappeared. All of 1871, more than 1,500 bright objects are observed on the surface of the moon with a frequency of appearance every single day. February 5th, 1877, in the Eudoxus crater, a light bright line can be seen for many days. March 21st, 1877, May 4th, 1877, the interior of Proclus crater is illuminated by many moving lights. All of 1879, and this year we have numerous appearances of bright objects on the surface of the moon. The crater of Hyginus is displayed brightness as if illuminated by some light source, while outside it luminous objects were constantly changing formation. A bright circle was seen in Fracastorius crater, which then took the shape of a cone. Before 1879 there was no conical structure, while today there are more than 1,000 conical structures. January 23rd, 1880. Light lines flash for several hours on the surface of the moon as if it were a signal. July 4th, 1881, two bright pyramidal projections were observed on the lunar horizon. May 8th, 1881, about 1,000 beams of light were seen in the Sea of Judgments. A bridge was later found at the same spot, which disappeared after a few years. April 24th, 1882, a large number of moving objects are observed in the Aristotle crater. March 26, 1882, countless luminous objects of various shapes appeared in the Sea of Judgments. November 23rd, 1887, a reddish shadow is observed in the Plato crater. July 15, 1888, a bright spot was suddenly observed on the surface of the moon, 10 times brighter than it. It moved over the lunar Alps and stayed for 20 minutes and then disappeared. At the point of the new moon, a circle was left that kept changing colors. September 10th, 1889, circular light with a spot in the center was seen in the Plinius crater. November 7, 1891, light lines flashed like a signal for several hours on the surface of the moon. 1892, 1896, 1899, throughout these years, a large number of moving lights were observed on the surface of the moon. April 23, 1915, a light ray is observed in the Clavius crater. January 15, 1915, 7 luminous objects formed the Greek letter C, that is alpha, beta, gamma, that is C, gamma, on the surface of the moon. October 10, 1916, a bright triangle is observed in the Plato crater. From 1922 to 1980, over 200 domes, 250 to 300 meters in diameter, have been observed on the lunar surface that move and change position, possibly igloos-type surface structures, loose and prefabricated. This is 1922 to 1980. June 14, 1940, 2 luminous columns are observed in the Plato crater. April 7, 1944, an inexplicable glow is observed on the surface of the moon. October 19, 1945, 3 bright lights are observed on the wall of Darwin. From 1950 to 1960, observed conical constructions that multiplied in an unusual way since 1865. There were 2, today there are more than 1,000. There are so many here, but I'll go through all of them. March 7, 1950, moving lights on the surface of the moon photographed. 1953, something like an island rose above the surface of the moon. 1955, 2 flashes were observed in the area of Taurus. Again, 1955, a lightning bolt is observed at the south pole of the moon. 1958, English astronomer T. O'Neill and P. H. Wilkins observed a bridge on the surface of the moon which disappeared after a few days. 1958, bright linear symbols like letters of an alphabet are observed on the surface of the moon. 1958, November 3rd, observed moving lights and release of gases on the surface of the moon while a red light was moving very slowly. November 5th, 1959, lights flashed like a signal for a long time. November 17, 59, a bright object flashed in the Plato crater. September 13, 1959, 2 bright objects were photographed leaving the surface of the moon at high speed while bright clouds was over the Lee Troft area. The moon has no clouds. 1960, the dark side of the Villeto crater was illuminated for 5 minutes. 1961, 5 bright objects flashed and left the surface of the moon. With their removal, a release of gases was observed. In 1963, many red objects moved on the surface. June 21st, 1964, a black shadow moves in the south hemisphere of the moon. July 3rd, 1965, bright flashes are observed for 70 minutes in the area of Aristarchus crater. In this is August 6, 7, and 8 in 1965. On 3 consecutive days, a strong beam is emitted from the surface of the moon in an unknown direction. March 1966, large number of bright objects all over the surface of the moon. September 25th, 66 and October 25th, 66, an unusual number of bright flashes are observed in the Plato crater and in the Gassendi area for 1 hour. February 4th, 1966, the Soviet spacecraft Luna 9 photographs tower-like structures arranged in straight lines in the Sea of Storms. September 11, 1967, a black cloud with a red border was observed in the Sea of Serenity. December 24th, 1968, Apollo 8 orbits the moon. Astronauts saw a huge UFO and photographed it It had an area of 16 square kilometers. May 22nd, 1969, Apollo 10 was orbiting the moon, and the lunar rover was going to land on the moon, and while it was 7,200 meters from the ground, a UFO from the surface of the moon rose vertically and went to meet it. Astronauts photographed and filmed it. July 16, 1969, when Apollo 11 was heading towards the moon, a UFO met the craft and accompanied the craft to the moon. July 19, 69, when the moon landing of Apollo 11 landed on the moon, it was accompanied by two large UFOs which were filmed by the astronauts. The two UFOs multiplied their luminosity as they left. Later, a very large UFO appeared and was accompanied by 10 smaller ones. Finally, Apollo 17 also photographed two UFOs on its way to the moon. The craters Linnaeus, Evdoxos, Mr. have become foci of concentrations of light objects. The crater of Aristarchus is the most enigmatic and gathers the most possibilities that there are entrances to the interior of the moon. Teams of scientists who collaborated independently of NASA counted areas of the appearance of lights and objects on the surface of the moon, over 1,000 cases. During the Apollo research program, NASA recorded over 2,000 cases of lights appearing on the surface of the moon, and also observed a huge black body 250,000 meters long, 50,000 meters wide, flying over the moon. That's huge, obviously. The astrophysicist Dr. Morris Jessup of the University of Michigan, shortly before he left among us, all lights are directed by rational beings, he said, who serve some purpose unknown to us. The constructions observed on the surface of the moon and which have appeared in the last 200 years are the work of intelligent beings based on the interior of the moon. There is no way that the above phenomenon are optical illusions, because photographic lenses do not suffer from hallucinations and only photograph real objects. The moon is not dead. It's a cosmic laboratory of intelligent beings whose purpose the U.S. rulers know and do not reveal, he said. What is thought-provoking is the noise that has been made about missions to the moon. Astronomical expenses were incurred. Scientific instruments were placed on the surface of the moon and research vehicles of our satellites. Why all this? For human curiosity and vanity? Why this irritating silence after the completion of Apollo space program? Why did the Russians also suddenly stop their programs at a time when the trip to the moon would enhance their prestige? The moon was forgotten, and it remains silent to inspire lovers and poets. So what happened? And suddenly, without any justification, December 12, 1996, NASA announced on the television media there may be life on the moon. Please leave your comments about this, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.